and welcome to day 2 of the BRICS Academic Forum. Thank you for joining us. My name is Sunaina Kumar, and I am a senior fellow with the Observer Research Foundation. We are here to discuss a topic that has become extremely crucial to our everyday lives, and even more so with the pandemic, as services like education, health, and financial inclusion have all moved to the digital mode. Digital public goods are in essence dictated by the spirit of tech for all and tech by all. And with the help of open source software, open data, and open content, it delivers crucial public services like health, education, and a sound architecture for digital public goods is now a necessity for every country. It also represents a way to recover from the pandemic, many of the challenges, and the economic fallout that the world is facing. It can also help us reach the goals of the Sustainable Development Agenda of 2030. And that brings us to some questions. What is the role of government, business, and civil society in ensuring that digital public goods are effective and accessible to all, while safeguarding individual digital rights of citizens? How can countries learn from each other's experiences, reuse and adapt technologies? And more specifically for us today, what are the measures that BRICS can take on to support the development of digital public goods? To discuss all these issues, we have a panel with speakers from each of the BRICS member states. Jose Eduardo Brandão is the Deputy Director of Studies on International Economic and Political Relations, the Institute for Applied Economic Research in Brazil. Ekaterina Khlunova is the Deputy Director for BRICS for Cooperation on Science and Technology Innovation at the International Center for Innovation in Science, Technology and Education in Russia. Abhinav Prakash is the Assistant Professor, Shri College of Commerce, University of Delhi in India. He is an expert of Indian economy and economics of public-private partnerships. Feng Cheng is the Deputy Director of FinTech Research Center, China Academy of Information and Communication Technology in China. And finally, Ashraf Patel is a researcher at the Institute for Global Dialogue, South Africa. He focuses on digital policy and the knowledge economy. Thank you and a warm welcome to our wonderful panel. I'd like to begin by inviting each of you to offer your thoughts on your country's approach to digital public goods. What has been achieved? What have been the challenges and obstacles on the way? I should also mention we will be opening this session to questions and we look forward to your participation. So to the audience, please share your questions and we will be taking them on later in the session. Dr. Brandão, if you could get us started by telling us about Brazil.
Good morning and good afternoon for all. I would like to thank the coordination of India for this meeting. I congratulate and thank you all for the great work done under the presidency of the BRICS. The last year, BRICS Academic Forum recommendations to the leaders identified multiple risks for unequal digitalization and the country regulatory differences. This situation may deepen the digital divide, and it was recommended that the idea of a fair and equitable provision and governance for digital public goods should be pursued by BRICS. One of the practical recommendations was the creation of a data bank of best practices on development, mainly for application in remote areas. This is a good example of how digitalization combined with the international cooperation practices can leverage the post-COVID world. In Brazil, we have some interesting experience of digitalization of public services. Perhaps the main one is the single registry for social programs. It is a set of information about Brazilian families in poverty and extreme poverty situation. This information is used by the federal government, states, and municipalities to implement public policies that are capable of improving the life of these families. With the arrival of COVID-19 and the reduction in the population's income, the single registry was an essential tool. A new digital tool was implemented in the form of a mobile phone app that made it possible to implement emergency financial assistance for more than 39 million beneficiaries. Another interesting digital tool is Connect to SUS. This tool gives citizens access to their registration in the unified health system. For example, there are records of care, exams, and vaccines. The more recent initiative is the MyGov application, which aims to unify the registry and the access to the all federal digital public services. There are some of the experience that could be included in the BRICS databank of practices on development. But isolated actions will probably not be enough for us to improve the governance to the digitalization process in BRICS countries. Some initiatives can serve as a reference to a common framework. For example, in the last year, the United Nations set a roadmap for digital cooperation. The roadmap begins by defining how the international community can work together, beginning to build inclusive digital economy and society, develop human and institutional capacity, protect human rights and human agency, promote digital trust, security, and stability, and foster global digital cooperation. We also can have as a reference the digital public goods standard. It advocates that they use the open software, open data, open artificial intelligence models, open standards, and open content. Another reference is the metrics created by International Telecommunications Union. It links information technology actions to promote and achieve each of the development goals. The United Nations roadmap, the metrics, and the digital public goods standards can also be adopted or adapted by BRICS countries to promote digitalization with the focus on economic, social, and environmental sustainability. This is my initial contribution. Thank you.
Thank you very much. A lot of thoughts that we could come back to later on in the discussion. Ms. Khlunova, if we could bring you in next.
Yes, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all my BRICS colleagues. Thank you for the opportunity to be a part of the BRICS Academic Forum. I work for the ICST, which together with the Ministry of Science and Higher Education represents Russia in the BRICS STI Steering Committee. The COVID-19 pandemic has forced all of us to become more flexible and to adapt to a different mode of work in order to continue our active cooperation. Being deprived of face-to-face meetings and traveling, all of us started to use the existing digital solutions to its maximum extent and to quickly start the development of some new necessary digital solutions in order to address all the challenges, particularly in the education and STI area. Business is always chasing innovations and profits, but the role of the government is not less important. Under new circumstances, its main goal is to introduce digitalization in all areas as fast as possible. Since I represent the STI and education area, I would like to say a few words about the measures taken by the Russian government to that end. The Russian government provides funding and grants for the implementation of digital services and solutions based on existing digital platforms, and also 2 special digital systems have been developed for these needs. The state information system called Modern Digital Educational Environment provides equal access to quality education for every student, including foreign students, on a free basis. This state information system consists of several components, including online courses, an analytical service, user support, and many more. This system has ensured the development of a network interaction between higher education institutions and virtual academic mobility of students. Students, regardless of their place of study, their residence, have been given an opportunity to have access to available educational content. At the moment, the system includes more than 100 universities, giving access to about 2,000 online courses. Another unified digital platform is called Digital Platform for a Researcher, and it allows to provide a single point of authorization for various databases. It provides information about publications. It helps to select grants and competitions based on the researcher's interest. It also informs the researchers about opportunities for supporting his or her project, and also to seek specialists according to researcher's profile, and to have the opportunity to send invitations to participate in the project. It is important to know that commercial companies are also able to interact directly with the scientific community by placing their own contests on the platform and conducting surveys among different audiences. Speaking about BRICS cooperation in the education area, the BRICS Network University is worth mentioning for sure. This is a unique 5-site platform which helps to unite the best practices, advanced knowledge, and the results of the advanced research of BRICS countries in educational programs. Speaking about the STI area of BRICS cooperation, in 2020, Russia was presiding in BRICS and was responsible for a big number of events that were conducted virtually for the first time in BRICS history. We also used the digital solutions to address all these challenges. And one of the best examples from my point of view is the 5th BRIC Young Scientists Forum held online. This was quite a challenge for all of us, taking into account the time difference in BRICS countries, the duration of forum. It lasted for 5 days, and we had more than 130 participants at one time, divided into several parallel thematic subgroups. We developed a special website with the opportunity to create your own portfolio, to see other participants' profiles, to communicate and exchange contacts. We also used some new tools for keeping the audience interest at a high level, which included online experiments, quizzes, and we had even a science stand-up contest with online voting. We were pleased to know that all of these new digital features were appreciated by BRICS countries, and we received a lot of positive feedback from young scientists. Also, in the STI area, we launched a digital platform for BRICS STI cooperation in order to facilitate the activities and meetings of 13 thematic working groups that we have in BRICS, approval of joint documents, and having a joint online library of minutes, declarations, and other documents. Due to digital opportunities and in order to join our efforts to combat COVID-19, Russia initiated a set of online expert meetings with the participation of more than 150 experts to ensure networking of research organizations and the business community of BRICS countries. We also launched a special COVID-19 pandemic call for BRICS multilateral R&D projects in a very tight timeline. Since all BRICS parties understood the importance of a quick and effective response to pandemic, this call was the fastest call in the BRICS history. In the conclusion, I would like to emphasize that this pandemic made all of us more flexible, more digital, and led us to even more close communication between our countries. And I would like to highlight the importance of common efforts in sharing national experience, and I hope for the continuation of our effective cooperation in future. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Ms. Khlunova. And you have nicely laid out for us the various areas where BRICS cooperation is possible, and that is something we need to look at in this discussion. I would like to invite Ms. Fong now.
Good afternoon and good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I am Fong Chang from CAICT China. And first of all, I would like to thank India as the host to give us a chance to speak here. And today, I want to mainly focus on digital finance inclusion in the development of digital finance inclusion in China. Actually, we have do a lot of efforts in this DFI several years ago. And back then, there was no COVID-19 pandemic. But I think development of digital financial inclusion really helped China a lot during 2020. It helped us a lot to, to go through the COVID-19 pandemic. And today, I want to share some experience in how we develop our digital financial inclusion. First of all, back in 2015, the Chinese government released a plan for advancing and development of inclusive finance. So after that period, China has made great progress in the development of financial inclusive finance, especially with the progress of a new generation of technologies such as big data, AI, cloud computing, and so on. China's inclusive finance is also developing towards digital, mobile, and intelligent. And here I want to share some results we made for the past few years. First of all, I think the increasing of the convenience of financial services, it is greatly driven by the digital technology. By the end of 2020, the number of mobile payment users in China has reached about 854 million, accounting for 86.4% of the total internet users. Even the use rate of mobile payment in rural areas, I mean really rural areas in remote and property-stricken counties, reached 79%. So that's a high number, you know. So the development of online payment has significantly enhanced the user experience and convenience of financial services for the public. Even Chinese people in very remote areas, they could get linked to the internet, to the mobile phones, and to the mobile internet. They could buy things and then could enjoy, you know, the finance services through their network or their cell phones. I remember a very hard time that the Chinese people are required to stay at home. We shouldn't go out to avoid a sparing of the pandemic. But with the link to the internet, everybody at home could still, you know, we could still check the news and speak with contact with our friends and watch videos and movies at home. So it released the tensions of the Chinese people. And second, I think the quality of efficiency of digital financial inclusiveness have been improved in China. For example, in China, enterprises want to get a loan from the bank. And with the support of digital technology, the enterprise owners could get a loan from the bank within only 3 minutes, literally a minute. So I think this will shorten, you know, the process of the whole process and give a lot of convenience to the enterprise owners, especially during the pandemic. Small enterprises, the small business, are the most difficult ones. If they want to get a loan from a bank, we use this digital, digital methods. They could really facilitate their loan process. And the third, I think digital financial inclusion products continues to enrich the Chinese diversified services. You know, by integrating and applying various new technologies, there are a lot of new services now applying in China, such as online supply chain finance, e-commerce finance, special digital loan for small and medium-sized enterprises, and the role of remote sensing and satellite positioning technology in underwriting and claim settlement to be played, and digital insurance products will be launched precisely. You know, also because due to the pandemic last year, a lot of people in the villages and the remote areas, they couldn't go to the big cities to earn a living. So I think maybe this is a very, a common phenomenon in every country, especially like in India, Brazil, or any other country in the world. But because we have some digital methods, these people which are stay in the village and remote areas, they could get linked to the e-commerce apps, and they could sell the agriculture products to the people from the big cities. For example, this is my cell phone, and I have several apps in my cell phone. I could buy, fruits from Hainan. I could buy potato from Xinjiang, and I could buy tomato from anywhere in China. So by this single cell phone, I can link to every place in China, and I can link to the most remote and most poor villages. This gives convenience to customer as me, but also I can give opportunities and a better life opportunities for the people all over China. So that is I think that is the progress we made from the past few years. And here I have some valuable experiences to share with our colleagues. First, I think the strong and support of national policy is very crucial for the development of digital inclusive finance. I think the Chinese government has successfully issued various documents, especially in monetary, physical, taxation, industrial policies, and other aspects. So these policies really help to develop the digital inclusive finance all over the country. And secondly, I think the digital infrastructure is the cornerstone of the development of digital finance inclusion. I have just shared the numbers of our development of digital infrastructure. And in China, even very poor people in remote areas, they could get through the internet. Because in China, we don't really care about how much I invest and how much I get repaid. We care more about the people. No matter what is nations, you know, China has 56 nations all over China. We don't consider his nations, his religion background. Everyone he or she is Chinese people. We will care about him, even if she or she lives in very poor areas. We never let off the single Chinese people. So in the past few years, we have built a lot of the communication-based stations in the mountains, by the rivers, on the cliffs, and everywhere. We put a lot of infrastructure investment to ensure that not one person is left behind. Everyone could enjoy the digital services all over the country. And
Thank you, Ms. Fong. You did mention the role of policy, and definitely that is something that we need to discuss. I would like to invite Mr. Patel now to tell us about digital public goods in South Africa. What has been achieved so far? What have been the gaps?
Thank you, Sunaina. Thank you, fellow panelists. Warm greetings from South Africa. And thank you, India, for hosting BRICS Academic Forum 2021. To start off with, South Africa is in a very challenging space, in a sense that, like all countries, the COVID pandemic has exposed many divisions and vulnerabilities. And as a result of economic contraction, despite lots of investment or liquidity that was invested in the market, we haven't managed to develop the public goods, especially the digital goods that is so essential for health and education in particular. So some of the experiences, some positive, but most negative. The challenges, of course, has definitely been in education and public education in particular. When we had a hard lockdown, most of the higher education students had to go back home. Many of them are from rural areas in marginal communities, and most of them do not have laptops. So as a start, government has intended to provide most of the poorer students with laptops and connectivity, but after 1 year or more, there are still many gaps and challenges. Linked to the provision of data and laptop and devices is also usability and capacity. So, how do you then overnight transfer knowledge and content onto the devices without the training and capacity building? So that was another major challenge. Because no one was prepared for it, not even the teachers, not even the administrators. And so that did point out to many gaps in our educational system and much deficit. As you know, our data must fall movement has grown because we have very high data costs. Mobile data is very expensive in South Africa because we've taken a very much, let's say, neoliberal policy to the communication sector. As a result, over the years, we have not invested in digital public goods. And our Broadband Connect program that has been running for 10 years, it has moved very slowly. And as a result, we have not invested in infrastructure or broadband for poorer communities. So all of these has been very challenging. In fact, as we speak, the social grants, government has promised social grants to indigent households. And in our post office, for instance, over 150,000 of these applications is just standing still because they cannot find the people, they cannot find the beneficiaries. So the people have requested the social grants, so we don't have tracing systems to say, okay, these 150,000 people I need, they applied, but the money is there, but we cannot disperse the money. So that has been quite a challenge and a gap, despite South Africa spending millions, hundreds of millions in ICT systems procurement over the years. We haven't had an integrated e-government policy. So there are lots of gaps, lots of mismatches. And as a result, government has been, to a large extent, found wanting and managing from crisis to crisis. So it does speak to a lack of an integrated ICT policy, number one. So the challenge is, how do we get an integrated ICT policy? How do we have the digital infrastructures, as well as, very importantly, I would say, the standards and interoperability. So if you don't have standards and interoperability, you have an ad hoc mismatch approach. And this is what we see happening in South Africa. There are some gains. I mean, we have had very good public communications on COVID information, public health, the use of social media, the use of mass media. So that has been positive. Large scale of the population are aware of the dangers of COVID and the vaccines. But again, you know, as always in South Africa, it's always a case of too little and too late. And I think as a result, we are in economic contraction. Growth is only estimated to be 1.2% this year and hopefully 2.3% next year. But there is scope for public digital goods, especially broadband, especially in education. I would say the need for open content, massive online learning, curricula, open science content. These are areas that we can cooperate on and share knowledge. That is what is needed. And then remember, in Africa, we have the Africa Free Trade Agreement, the AfCFTA, which is opening up the borders. But then again, you know, the challenges in the smaller countries in Africa is even more huge than in South Africa. So, you know, you can imagine South Africa is facing these challenges, and we meant to be the leading economy on the continent. So you can imagine the challenges in the other African countries are quite dire. And so, yes, I would say there is a definite need to learn from other countries within BRICS and the developing South. And how do we learn from successful cases, such as in BRICS, to invest in the digital public goods and services? So there is much to learn from our side and some to share. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Patel. As you have rightly pointed out, the pandemic has, of course, accelerated the adoption of digital public goods and innovation as well. But it has also widened the gaps and showed up some of the vulnerabilities. Professor Prakash, what would you say to that?
Yes, thank you, Sunana, and thank you, ORF, for organizing this very insightful discussion. And namaste to everyone. It's very difficult to speak after such a distinguished panelist, but I would like to point out certain things. When we talk about the digital public goods, Sunana, we have broadly three models in the world. One is the corporate-led, private sector-led model, where you have the techno giants who control the marketplace, who control the digital infrastructure. Also, you have the model where the state controls or has the final say on the access to digital infrastructure, or has the final say over the private companies themselves. In India, as usual, we have adopted the Madhyam Marg, the middle path, which is basically the public-private partnership, where the private companies are free to offer solutions to develop their own businesses, to provide internet services, to provide digital infrastructure. But the state also works in collaboration with the private companies, not to do surveillance, not to control the data, but to ensure inclusion in the country. So you have in India the India Stack, which is basically the world's largest API structure, which is open to all the private companies, innovators, startups to develop their own app to provide certain digital services to the people of India. So when it comes to India, the India operates on the basis of three principles. One is the digital infrastructure should be a utility available to all. It should not be the case that few private companies are controlling the digital infrastructure and they can restrict their access based either on political opinions, based on some kind of social political values, or just say for the sake of corporate or strategic rivalry. So digital infrastructure should be open to all, every citizen, unless and until barred by the sovereign law. Second is the governance and services on demand, that people should be able to access digital services, governance, and other kind of private services on demand. And India has made tremendous progress on that front. So in India, you have one of the world's largest biometrics identification system, which is Aadhaar. More than 1.21 billion Aadhaar cards have been issued so far. Based on the Aadhaar card, you have other services like e-sign, e-KYC. You have the UPI, which is the direct transfer of funds. Every month, we are having more than 3 billion transactions based on the government app, which is the BHIM app built on the UPI. Now, this UPI is also available to every private company. So you have many private startups who have come up with their own payment apps, the different kinds of structures, which has driven the financial inclusion to a large extent in India. When we talk about India, one thing is very important, that the main issue in India is of the digital access rather than the digital uses. When we talk about digital public goods, the debate is normally around privacy, the debate is around data protection, the debate is around consumer privacy and on. But when you talk about India, the debate is mainly about the access to the data, the access to the services, the affordability, the cost of the internet, the cost of the smartphones and the laptops. As my panelist from South Africa was talking, we also faced the same problem last year in India, where suddenly large part of education sector was forced to adopt to the online teaching mode. And that basically created lots of problem because everyone cannot afford high-speed broadband connection. Everyone cannot afford high-end smartphones or the laptops. So it brought into sharp focus the digital divide in the country. So that is the main debate in India, how to ensure inclusion and access. When it comes to finances, I would say India has performed really well. There were only 50% of the people who had the bank account in 2014. Now almost 80 to 85% people have access to bank account because of the government scheme, which is called Pradhan Mantri Jan Dhan Yojana, which basically utilized the digital infrastructure to reach the unbanked population. And large number of the bank holders, almost 50% of them are women, 63% of the bank accounts are in the countryside, not in the metropolitan center. When it comes to the numbers, I don't think we have to talk about the numbers because when it comes to India and China, the numbers will always be 400 million, 500 million. So what is more important is the ease of life which digital public infrastructure and digital public good has ensured for the lots of people. But there are other questions as well. Number one problem is of the digital sovereignty. This is something as the BRICS country we need to think about. We cannot give access to our data. We cannot give access to the use of the digital services by our citizen to some, let's say, unaccountable corporate sitting somewhere in the world. I mean, they cannot impose their own private laws on the Indian law or the African, Russian, Chinese, or Brazilian law. So digital sovereignty is very, very important when we talk about the digital public good. Second point is this entire question of universal access. Should going forward, we need to have free internet because India has the world's cheapest internet access as of now. But as digital economy becomes central to everything we do, from education to health to financial transactions, what about the cost of the internet? Should we treat internet itself as a public good which should be provided everyone for free? Healthcare in India is making great progress. We have the world's largest insurance scheme, which is Ayushman Bharat. 500 million people are entitled to that, to the free healthcare, tertiary healthcare in India, and which is also linked to very comprehensive socioeconomic database of 2011. So you have now, because of the digital infrastructure, you can integrate your census data, lots of data which you generate, because you have so many data, but they were not interoperable so far. But now with the
Thank you
digital
so much,
technology,
Professor Prakash. We will return to some of these points, but the one point that you have raised is also a question that has come from the audience. How can we ensure digital public goods reach the masses when some of the BRICS countries have low internet penetration? This is something that Mr. Patel has also brought up. And I would like to ask this question to Mr. Patel, in fact. Are there actually any solutions that you can think of to address the question of access?
Thank you, colleagues. So yes, there's much to learn from other BRICS countries. The first is lowering of data prices. So that's a regulatory. We have a regulatory problem in South Africa. We have very powerful monopolies. It's just the two mobile monopolies that control 60% of the market in this price setting. So we need a regulatory intervention. So that would be the first to address that. But linked to that, we need then the broadband infrastructure utilities to have to be capacitated and funded to roll out the broadband. And that would be the other challenge, to provide the digital public goods. So those would be the two regulatory tools, coupled with public digital infrastructure investment, prioritizing rural areas.
That, in fact, is also a question from the audience, which is, should there be more of an effort in building sustainable digital infrastructure in tandem with the rise of delivery of public goods like health and education? Ms. Fong, how would you say China has approached this?
Well, I think the digital infrastructure is really a very crucial, and it's a precondition for the delivery of public goods, digital public goods to the people. So I think there should be we should be a large amount of investment in the digital infrastructure, and should have a very detailed plan. For example, 5-year plan or 3-year plan to carry on the project and make it to ensure that it is going on time. I think in China, first we ensure that the infrastructure investment is the investment in the digital infrastructure is enough. And second, we ensure that the process and the steps are carried on in time. And the third, we have a check when the digital infrastructure is built, and to make sure that the quality is good.
Right. Thank you. We have, of course, been talking about the question of access. The other question that does come up is, of course, of privacy and rights. Ms. Khlunova, what would you say can be done as we, especially in a setting like this, which is BRICS, where we're talking about vast amounts of data, large operational skills, and data, as they say, is the new oil, and we have governments and tech companies that are collecting large amounts of data, and of course that's also a necessary thing to do. I mean, there's risk to it as well as benefit. So, what would you say? How can the balance be made between the imperatives of digital rights and privacy while we're developing digital public goods?
Yes, this is a problem that we are facing in BRICS. We have 13 working groups, and in every group we have this problem of intellectual property. and of sharing some data with each other, because it is always a problem when we have different legislations in every BRICS country. But I know that there is a special meeting of ministers of intellectual properties in BRICS, and they're trying to elaborate, to develop some standards that we can take as granted and go ahead. I think that some joint standards is a key, is an answer for this problem, for a solution.
Dr. Brandau, would you like to come in on this? There's also a specific question from the audience, which says that how are the countries are clearly not on an equal foot when it comes to digitalization. How can we assist each other in BRICS?
There is still a big difference, not only between countries, but also internally in the BRICS countries. We could see that the access to the digital world became a public good during the pandemic. The pandemic was a great challenge for education in Brazil, made with the low coverage for internet access on low-income families. Home working was also a reality for only a portion of the population. Brazil, around 11 million workers did home work. So low-cost broadband internet access will continue to be a challenge. On the other hand, the acceleration of internet access has increased the cyber attacks, the theft of personal data, and the cyber fraud. We need to think about how public policy can make internet access more equitable and secure. This is a challenge for the BRIC countries, and we don't have now a magic solution. We must think about how the governance of digitalization can help us to go ahead.
Right. There is a question on the cost of delivery of digital public goods, and I would like to address this question to Professor Prakash, perhaps looking at the India example and also widely at BRICS countries. How can the cost of delivery be controlled?
The most important thing here will be the economies of the scale. And in the case of India, we have seen that the cost of internet is perhaps the lowest in the world. That's simply because of the economies of the scale, because the companies can operate on a very large scale. We're seeing that in the case of broadband connections, the government of India is trying to connect more than 600,000 villages with high-speed internet. The costs are extremely low because you have a large-scale manufacturing and the large-scale implementation. So perhaps BRICS country and the other developing countries can collaborate to create a unified market, or at least, if not a unified market, because that's a difficult thing to come to have an agreement on different terms and conditions. But let's say providing access to companies in each other territory to operate, to take benefit of the economies of scale. I think that is something we can do. The second thing is about the innovation. As of now, much of the innovation in the realm of digital economy is coming from the West. So perhaps the BRICS countries should also foster innovation. In the case of India, we have seen that you have the Indian states, and the Prime Minister regularly organizes hackathons to encourage Indian students, innovators to come up with innovative solutions with new technologies and so on. So perhaps BRICS countries can also collaborate to make their countries the center of innovation, financial innovation, technological innovation, which will bring down the cost, because the technology is not value neutral. The direction the technology takes depends on the country where it is being developed. So if you have the Indians developing technologies, the focus will be on low cost. The focus will be on ease of use by a large population which is not highly educated. Whereas if you have the technology being developed in, let's say, in America, the focus will be perhaps on more high-tech end use, or maybe more privacy, more other things. So technology is not value neutral. We have to be very careful about that. So I think economies of scale and fostering innovation can bring down the cost in BRICS countries and the other developing countries.
Okay, Ms. Fong, you of course had laid out for us digital inclusion and how China is going about it. But you would look at the next generation or just innovation in digital public goods going ahead in China. What would you forecast? What is coming next?
Well, I think we have done a lot of efforts in the past few years, and I think in the future we want to help more to the people in the poverty areas, in the remote areas. We want to raise their life standards because in the past few decades, China has made some progress, and we want to ensure that this progress is shared by each and every one Chinese people. We don't want a single people to be left behind. In China, in some big cities, the life standards is maybe is very high in Beijing, Shanghai, and Hong Kong and Shenzhen. But in some remote areas, especially in some remote villages, the life standards not as much as in those big cities. So we want to help the village people more. We want to give them more opportunities to education, to the digital finance services. We want to give them more links to the big cities. We want them to enjoy the results of the development of the whole nation. And that's all.
And well, just to follow up on that, how do you think digital public goods can be the means to achieving that?
Well, I think the digital public goods could serve as a as a road as an opportunity for those people in remote villages, because without the digital public goods, they may be just do their farm work and could do nothing else. But with our network and our digital services, digital public goods linked to them, they could get on into the internet. They could see what is happening in China and the world. They could enjoy the online education, same online education with the students in big cities. That could educate them and give them more hope and imagination towards their future lives. And they could get more work opportunities. For example, that the cell phone, in every Chinese people, we use cell phone. And in my cell phone, there are several e-commerce apps. In this e-commerce apps, it is linked to the every villages, the remote areas in China. I could buy every agricultural goods from Xinjiang, from Tibet, from Hainan, from Shandong, and this gives the opportunity and give them work chances for the people from the poor villages, and it could really enhance their life standards and give them more chances to share the development results of a whole Chinese country.
Thank you, Ms. Fong. Ms. Khlunova, you of course have been hearing from all our panelists today some of the challenges that every country is facing on the path to public goods and scaling those up. If you were to you of course did point out some of the areas of cooperation, the role that BRICS could play, but in terms of actual achievement, what would you say has been done in terms of cooperation, and what can be done ahead?
There has been a lot of progress in BRICS STI cooperation. And speaking about working groups, every working group has developed its own site or a platform We have a virtual institute for photonics. We have a site for ocean science, for astronomy. We have some flagship projects. And of course, due to pandemic, we all realize there are new rules that we should play. And without internet, without online meetings and some web platforms, we cannot go further. So I think that the solution for all of this is available internet in every BRICS country with a low cost that is available for all people, not only for big cities. In Russia, for example, we have even a governmental program, available internet, and internet is becoming available for remote regions. And we have governmental services that can be delivered only by internet, and that makes people starting using their phones, their laptops, or going to some special offices of governmental services where people will help them and they teach them how to use it. So this is also very important for every BRICS country. But of course, when we speak about cooperation, a lot of progress is already made, but speaking about further steps, we should keep online very active, because it's more faster than traveling, for example, from Brazil to Russia. It's cheaper, and we can make more faster steps.
So we have about 9 minutes to go, and I would like to ask the closing question to all our panelists today. And the question is, the gender digital divide is a challenge which is emerging across all countries. How do we ensure that we create a framework that is women first by design in the delivery of digital public goods? Professor Prakash, can we begin with you?
Well, that's a difficult question, because we have to address the root cause first, which is that the female literacy lags behind the male literacy. So we have to start from fixing our education system, because as of now there is a divide in the access to education. The divide is less of infrastructure but more a social divide, and then you have the divide in the technical education. So we have to start by basic financial digital literacy. That will, in the going forward, can bridge the digital divide, and then perhaps we can design, more access, or let's say the products which are more useful for the female gender, because in countries like India, lots of women are working as the homemaker. So their requirements from the digital world, digital applications, is very different from the office-going population. So we have to keep those things in mind, the local social structure, the local cultural milieu, which should be inbuilt in our digital solution for the future decade.
Mr. Patel?
Thank you for that. Definitely, we need to integrate gender and youth in all the digital policies going forward, as they constitute the majority of the population in the BRICS countries as well as the global south. Quite incidentally, the ICT ministers of the G20 nations are meeting, I think, today and tomorrow. And when I looked at the document or the draft, they are one of the themes is digital public goods. So there is an alignment in the thinking. So it would be good to follow up. And in their work, they also have a discussion on mainstreaming universal access to digital services, as well as mainstreaming gender in the digital economy and society going forward, cognizant of the fact that in the COVID pandemic, there has been a lot of job losses, and a large proportion of the burden has fallen on the woman in the household. In all these dynamics, we need to disaggregate, and then, as BRICS researchers say, come out with various solutions towards gender equity and youth participation in the digital age in our countries.
Dr. Brandau?
I agree with my colleagues. The problem involves the focus of public policies. In the case of Brazil, we must focus mainly for Black women. That is an important part of the digital education. We need to grow the digital education for women in Brazil, especially for Black women.
Well, actually, for this question, I don't have much experience or advice to share because in China, I couldn't feel the digital divide in digital public goods delivery. I think every digital products, or every digital services, men and women are, they are equal to the access of using it. And I think for the gender digital divide, I think women should not only ask for their rights. Women should actually take in work in whole society and earn money by themselves. They could live independently. In this way, I think their status is earned by themselves, and not only by their requests or requirements. So maybe that is my point. Thank you.
Thank you. And the last word to you, Ms. Khlunova, and perhaps you could tell us this from the perspective of Russia and also for BRICS.
With China, in Russia, the situation with gender difference is not a big problem, really. The majority of workers in healthcare system, in education, are women. The percentage of women working in government and in business is very high. So I don't think that there is a difference in the public goods, digital goods for women and men. They should be equal.
Okay, thank you very much to all our speakers. We have discovered that there is a lot of scope for digital cooperation, and is yet a lot to be done as well to address the gaps and vulnerabilities that do exist. And we hope to take up these conversations with you further on in the year through our research and more such engagements. Thank you very much for taking our time and for joining us.